member for Special Rehabilitation Team set up by the Ministry of Home Affairs and Royal Malaysia Police Counter-Terrorism Division. Without further ado, Dr. Ahmad, please.
Thank you very much, Ani. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. I requested the organizer to allow me to speak from the podium because if I speak over there, I might fall asleep. Because as a matter of fact, I just landed last night from Amsterdam, so I still have a jet lag. So I really need to stand. So I would like to welcome all of you to the session, the third session of our discussion about the religious view on the preventing and countering violent extremism. The main moderator introduced me just now as the person who engaged in rehabilitation programs, so I'm going to speak from that perspective. As a background, perhaps I can share with you a little bit about what Malaysia is doing with regard to countering violent extremism, especially the rehabilitation programs that we have for the radicalized individuals in Malaysia. So when the authorities arrested individuals who are involved in militancy or terrorism activities, beside the thorough investigation and extracting all information needed and prosecuting them in court, so after they went through all this process, the final destination for them would be in prison. So in prison, they would be subjected to rehabilitation programs. So I, as the academics, who is coming from university, I was invited by the Royal Malaysia Police to offer the expertise in rehabilitating this individual from being violent to adopt mainstream values. So basically, that's what I do. Before I do that, though, first thing that I should understand is what type of ideology that they have, what are the structure of ideology that they have, the point of extremism, and how they formulate the ideology, and so on and so forth. So after understanding those things, only then we can design and craft how we can counter that. So Malaysia has done this for so many years. It started in early 2000, and it is ongoing until today. So before this, we have the law we call Internal Security Act. Those guys were detained under this law. And until 2012, the law was repealed and replaced by Security Offences Special Measure. And also the Prevention of Terrorism Act 2015. So these are the legal instruments that they have to detain this individual. And under this detention, this is where they're subjected to rehabilitation. So I'm going to speak from that angle, from that point of view. So I'm going to start with the question, why religious views matters in rehabilitation? Why is that matters? It is important because the terrorists and the extremists, they use religious justification for their action. It's pure and simple. So that is the starting point. So this is why religious values, religious view, and religious approach is important. So when we investigate, when we investigate the ideology of the extremists, we're going to come across with a certain element which shows that they adopted extremism, which leads to violence. Well, of course, I acknowledge that everybody has the freedom to believe, the freedom of expression. That is the right of any individual. I mean, we talk about the human right, we talk about the freedom of belief, and so on and so forth. Yeah, we acknowledge that. But when you start crossing the line, from the red line, from being just a mere belief interaction, this is where you cross the red line, and this is where you are in trouble with the law. So when we investigate this structure of ideology, we come across with a common theme that they believe. Number one is, for example, exclusivism. They believe is, okay, our group, our belief is the only belief that we have, and other people have to submit to that. And those people who do not submit to that, so this is where they cross the line, they have to be eliminated. Not only just they just believe in exclusivism. Well, of course, in there also extremism element also in there. And the third element is violence. So if you just believe in certain thing which is radical in nature, well, by law, it has nothing. I mean, you don't violate any laws. But when you start to translate the ideas into action, this is where you cross the line. So this is always a problem in court. I was called to testify in court in the terrorism cases, for example, in Malaysia. I would be facing a very hard time to answer the question from the defense counsel who pressure me to say, okay, how can you say that these guys with possession of books, extremist materials, or possession of pictures and videos, actually terrorists and cause a danger to society? Well, I have to convince the court. I say that if you just believe in something radical, it doesn't make you terrorist. But if you start to translate the idea into action, this is where you cross the line. So you commit certain things which, under the law, it is a violation of certain things, okay? Causing harm, for example. So I had to draw the distinction between those persons who commit ideological offenses, meaning that they just believe in wrong ideology, and criminal offenses, which is actually they cause harm to the public, all right? So exclusivism, extremism is another, the element which contained in the ideology of the extremist or terrorist. And yeah, so another thing is we can also find that beside exclusivism, they do not have the value of mutual respectability. Mutual respectability is not part of them, meaning that exclusivism, I believe that all religion, they believe in exclusivism, meaning that their religion is the only religion which is right, yes. But living together with others, coexist with others is another important values which actually we have to recognize. So even though Islam, for example, in Islam, we do inna dina indallah, we recognize that, but we also acknowledge the existence of other religion, and the respect for other religion. We do have that. But whenever we come across with people who not only just believe that in exclusivism, but they also believe in the elimination of other people, because they say that in the hadith and the Quranic verses, there are a lot of things talking about elimination of other peoples because they have a different belief. So this is where we have a problem of violent extremism. So it is not just belief, but also action. So on that basis, that's why I say that religious view is very, very important in preventing and countering violent extremism. All right. I won't be taking so long. I just want to mention a few points. So now, what should we do if we know that religion is hijacked, religion is used to justify violence, religion is used to justify terrorism, the act of terror, and to cause harm to the public and other people? What should we do with it? All right. Number one, we have to acknowledge, we have to go deep into the religion, each religion, and try to find out values, the common and universal values that we can share and we can work on it. I think that is the best way for us to do. Of course, in Islam, we also have this value that is the belief in the mutual respectability of other religion. Even though Islam is, yes, Muslim belief in the exclusivism that Islam is the religion for them. But at the same time, they also believe that they need to respect other religion. I mean, we can see this thing happen, or cases that we seen during the time of the Prophet and also the companion, and even in the Quran itself, recognize other religion and the need to respect for other religion. For example, lakum dinukum waliyadin, or la ikraha fid din. There are a lot of other verses and the hadith also mention about that. So we need to understand the true content, the content of that religion. And not only we have to understand, for example, in the case of Muslim, Islam as the religion, but also we need to understand or appreciate the values existed in other religions as well, so that we can work on the common basis of the universal values. So That is the first step that we should do. And the second thing is the mutual respectability. We need to emphasize that. Mutual respectability, not only to understand, but also to respect. I think the problem that we have is because we do not respect other people's religion. Well, we may have differences, but if there is no respect for other religion, there is no appreciation for other religion, and the failure to coexist, the principle of coexistence, ability to coexist and to live with one another is also another thing that we should emphasize. I think that if we can capitalize on this positive value that existed in the religious text, I think we stand a chance of using it as an approach and a strategy in preventing and countering violent extremism. We have done these things before in rehabilitation. To come back to rehabilitation programs. Rehabilitation program in Malaysia is not only theological in nature. It's not only using religious approach, but also social, political, strategic thinking. There are a lot of other modules in rehabilitation programs. So theological and religious view is one of them. But in there, as I said earlier, because as a person who is involved in the programs, I can say that we emphasize on those values that I mentioned earlier. So I think that's all my view. I welcome other people's perspective. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmad. The next presenter is Muhammad Hanif Razak. He has served in the United Nations as an election supervisor in Namibia and as a military liaison officer with the Ministry of Defense in Singapore and Brunei. In 2007, through the Australian High Commissioner in Singapore, he was invited to DFAT Canberra to share his work on interfaith issues, including engagement with Muslim community. In 2010, he was invited by the Venerable Master Chin Kung AM, founder and president of Pure Land Learning College Association Incorporation, to help set up the Multi-Faith and Multicultural Centre in Toowoomba, Australia. Dr. Hanif?
Thank you, Hani. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of God, the most merciful and most compassionate. I like to start off by thanking Exin for giving me this opportunity, or rather give my Australian colleagues the opportunity to be here and to share with us what's our Toowoomba experience. I'll just take you quickly. I think it's fair that I should just introduce you to some of my colleagues here. Up there is Stephen. Stephen runs the Interfaith Centre in the University of Southern Queensland. And on Stephen's right is Kate Venables. Kate is a wonderful lady because she works with all the migrants from all the various refugees and migrants from the different countries. And on the right of Kate is my reliable, somebody whom I have to rely a lot on, my assistant, Mei Ling Chow. And of course, there we have John Agnew representing the Toowoomba Interfaith Working Group. Now, we have heard a couple of presentations. Now, I've been asked to, or rather we've been asked to share what we do in this aspect of prevention. Now, we all know, I think most of you, Malaysia has got some very good connections with Australia. It's a nation that we have no less than 270 ancestries. So you can imagine that kind of spread of diversity and multiculturalism. Now, I live in the city Toowoomba, which has been mentioned earlier on by your minister also, which again has no less than 80 ethnic cities. And they all have their own customs, beliefs. They keep them to themselves. And added to this diversity, Toowoomba is also a refugee welcome zone. So you can imagine that we welcome the refugees, we accept them. We have the Sudanese, just to name a few, Iraqis, Congolese, Afghan, Syrians, and lately the Yazidis. And there are many more if I were to mention. Though Australia is a Christian majority state, a denomination in that sense, but it is a secular state, and I believe it will remain secular. Now, amidst all this diversity, we use this as an advantage, it's an asset. So, of faith, beliefs, values, and customs, we have learned. We have learned to come together, to live harmoniously and peacefully. And this gift of diversity is what we are working in order to establish and forge a common humanity. I think that's the best way, a platform that you can move towards, to bring these people together and forge a common humanity. Now, particularly Australians, I think many of you know, we are very simple people. We patronize a lot of the op shops. If you want to know, op shops are actually recycle shops. So we don't go for all the branded goods too much. In particular in Toowoomba, we have people with big hearts. You'll be surprised if you come down there. And it's today named as one of the most livable cities in Australia. And we use this as our asset. So if you realize for today's sharing, why I chose this topic of building local capacity for peace and harmony, promoting social cohesion, strengthening social harmony, because of that diversity we have. So it's part of preventive work. Now, so let me share with you some of the fundamentals which, before we work on anything, we remind ourselves. First, we remind ourselves that human are bundles of potential. Every single human being, person out there has a potential. We remind ourselves that building blocks of life is about relationship. We strongly advocate education and communication, and we don't teach, because nobody likes to be taught. I think Mr. Jason earlier mentioned about education. I think that's what we advocate, education. We remind ourselves too that technology cannot replace human conversation. You can't do that. All right? If you think, yeah, you have some of the best smartphones, but that cannot replace the human touch, that eye to eye. That's very important. So that's what we try to do, is to create a space for a safe conversation. Because we also believe, we strongly believe that if you treat one with dignity and respect, I think that was mentioned about earlier about respect and dignity. I like it, but I'm not too sure. I'm not too much into your Malaysian politics. But your slogan for Visit Malaysia 2020, am I right? Is, let me see if I can recollect. Travel, enjoy, respect. Am I right? I hope you are with me, because that was your slogan. And I went through and to read out what it means by respect. That was your slogan. Hearing it, but I've been, oh my God. From the media, yeah. So that's why I'm not too sure. But I qualify by saying that I'm not into your politics, you know, but I love whatever nice things that you do here. So when you treat a person with dignity and respect, you get trust. So when this trust emerges, very likely these people will journey with you. No, they'll sort of go with you and say, okay, I can trust you, I can work with you, I think you are comfortable with me, or rather I am comfortable with you. Now, then what's the little small model that we have? We have a simple, what we call a guideline. We need some sense of direction to move. So we have this roadmap, which includes the core programs. We have a tagline that is easily identifiable, and our tagline is everyone matters. Everyone matters. I like, I'm sorry, Jamal, I'm not trying to put too much of sort of credit to Malaysia. I don't mean that. But I like your tagline, SAM. You know what SAM? SAM, S-A-M. Oh. No, saya anak Malaysia. No, because I met somebody in Europe, and quite funny thing, I spoke to him, I said, where are you from? He said, saya Sam. So I said, hey, what is Sam? Saya anak Malaysia. I thought that was beautiful, and I went to Google, sorry I shared it, and do you know there was a video on that by Dr. Sam?
Oh,
Yeah, so I think you all should go back and look at that and reflect. It's a beautiful video of your spirit of multiculturalism, your spirit of coexistence, as mentioned by Dr. Hamad, you know, that coexistence. It's a beautiful, go back and see it if you sort of have not heard about that. So, and our core programs, the programs that I'm just quickly about to share with you, are all community driven. Right? You have to involve the community because you can't take it on yourself, because then there is no ownership. That agenda of ownership is not created. And we try to use the 4 cardinal principles. When we do our programs, we use the 4 cardinal principles of sharing, kind words, beneficial act, and cooperation. So let me take you quickly to this short video clip, not video clip, a PowerPoint presentation of not just saying, but what we're trying to do. This is the one I'm mentioning about the strategic roadmap and the core programs there we have peace education, community engagement, dialogues of humanity, community leaders network, building bridges. Then that's everyone matters because we work with everyone. We work with the young people, the leadership, the business, the media, the faith, the education, the community. And that tagline of everyone matters. Yeah, it's important, like the media, because you like it or not, they are going to stay there. You like it or not, they can be kind to you, they can also be unkind to you. But you need to work with them. You need to develop some kind of a bond, some relationship of understanding. So that's why we work with all of them. Now, we have 2 main committees that drive this agenda. We have the Goodwill Committee of Toowoomba. This is generally the community that comprises of, we have a police representative from the local government, the education, the young, the religious. So they form what we call the Goodwill Committee of Toowoomba. This was launched in 2012. Now, to supplement or to complement the job, we have, this is the religious group, that today we have a combination of about 18 religious faith represented in what we call the Toowoomba Interfaith Working Group. And the man in the center, that's the Buddhist monk, that's the Venerable Master Cheng Hung. He is the president and founder of the Pure Land Learning College. This is where I work with him. I find a little comfort to say that I think by name, my name is Muhammad Hanif. I'm a Muslim, but I serve the Buddhist organization in heading their multi-faith and multicultural center. And it was mentioned about, how do you make, sometimes it's ignorance. How do you get them to understand about all the other 10 religions? So we have got this book on, we call the 360 scripture that carries all the commonalities, the values, and the virtues of the 10 main religions. So these are all done by the respective religious leaders. So we have printed these books, we have distributed these books, and the schools are using it, the community organizations are using it, the local government is using it. So that's a form of education. So at least they could see that commonality in all the religion. Now, we also run radio programs because it's important to educate the community. So we have a radio program that runs every Tuesday and Sunday for half an hour. So these radio programs, we allow those people from different culture, customs, or beliefs to come up and speak. Share with the community what your beliefs are, what your values are, what you intend to do, what good side do you see of coexistence, what are your experiences. And this radio program, now all our programs, we make sure our young are involved. We have about 20% of the youth are with us in the programs. So we give them the opportunity to speak, we give them the opportunity to share their values, their thinking. And if you look at it, we have on the extreme left, it's this girl, she's from Afghanistan, but she's a wonderful girl. She came with no English. You know, after 4 years, she's now in one of the top college, and she speaks very well. So we run other programs like, just like what you run, seminars, conferences. This is our Building Social Resilience seminar. And these are some of those conferences that we do. And you notice that, as I say, we involve a lot of the young. We involve them because we feel they are not the next generation. They are part of your generation. So you've got to bring them in on board. So these are some of the examples, and you see the school that we work with. Now, we do run programs for the young people. We sort of educate them to understand other religion. So we bring them, we bring them to the temple, we bring them to the monastery, we bring them to the mosque, we bring them to the synagogue. So we give them the opportunity, sort of, you educate them from the young, you develop them, so that, because like I say, they are part of your generation, so that they are going to live in that landscape. And that landscape that you see in Toowoomba in Australia is not going to change, because it's going to grow. The multiculturalism is going to grow in Australia. And we organize lunches, community lunches, because every quarter we meet up, we invite the community to come on board, have lunch, get to know each other, you know, develop relationship, develop bonds. And we do also community tea. Every quarter we go down to committees, the different organizations, we meet up with them, we organize community teas in their organization. So that's the way to connect people. And we do celebrate. All right, that's something we like to. We celebrate Christmas, we celebrate Chinese New Year, we celebrate by walking together, we celebrate in peace journey. And this is the common prayer that we develop. We are very mindful, so we use that as affirmation and prayer. So whichever level of comfort you are in, then you adopt that. So this is the community's prayer. So these are, again, as I said, some of the things that that we do. Now, partly is we manage this. Not, I'm saying that it's not all that what you see. It's not that there is no problem in Toowoomba. We do have lots of problems too, but we are managing it. So this is partly some of the things that really help us through. Is the visionary leadership of the Venerable Master Ching Kung, because the Master Ching Kung is the president and the founder, and I mean, I'm happy to share that that center which I'm running with mailing is fully funded by him. So that makes our job, and that is his contribution to the community, because it's an Australian, so he gives it back to the community by setting up this office full-time to provide the support to all the others that are running this program. And then, of course, like I said, that responsible leadership, community-driven initiative, conversation, we practice servant leadership, and we practice this 101% of leadership. What do you mean by 101%? It's very interesting because we have problems sometimes we couldn't get into groups. So we look at what is that 1% that person is comfortable in. So we put in 99% of the effort to win that 1%. So it looks easy, but it's not really that easy. And again, as I said, community owned, everyone matters. We remind ourselves that the mind debates, but the heart relates. I think that's very important, you know. It's the heart. It's all about the heart. And of course, we have an amazing community that thrives in believing, in giving rather than taking. So that's generally sum up. And I hope that is something that we could share. Of course, we are here also, we learned a lot this morning. And we're going to go back richer to understand some of the issues and problems and try to see where we can improve. So with that, I thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Captain Hanif. The next presenter is Senior Sergeant Debbie Howarth. She is the operations leader of the Security Counter-Terrorism Network for the Southern region. Until recently, Debbie was the team leader for both security intelligence and the Queensland Fixated Threat Assessment Centre and was instrumental in the establishment of the centre. Debbie was undertaken work placements with the Fixated Threat Assessment Centre in the United Kingdom and the FBI Behavioural Analysis Unit. Without further ado, Debbie.
Thanks, Honey, and thank you everyone for the opportunity to come and speak with you. I thought what I would do, first of all, is just run through a little bit of our Australian security environment, and then I will bring it down to the Queensland environment and how we are integrating with the community from a policing perspective to try and counter violent extremism within our communities. So in 2014, we all know that the world changed quite considerably, and in Australia in particular, we changed our terrorism threat level and it went to probable. So since 2014, we have had some terrorism offences and some disruptions, but nothing quite as significant as I think that we've seen across the world. So since 2014, we've had 95 people charged as a result of counter-terrorism related operations within Australia and 15 major disruptions. We've had 230 Australians travel to war zones in Iraq and Syria, and then we've cancelled about 250 passports of people wanting to go to the war zone. So as you can see, there's quite a big percentage of our population wanting to become involved in that war. So we've got to really work at ways and within the community to establish really strong relationships so that we can manage and monitor these people when they come back, so that we can ensure that our community is safe. So Australia has the Australian counter-terrorism plan that looks at how Australia will be prepared, how we will prevent terrorism activities and events, how we will respond to them and how we will recover. My role within the Queensland Police Service is very directed towards the first two, so that preparedness and the prevention. So I'm really working in that proactive strategy, in that proactive phase of identifying and intervening early so that we can address these issues before they become too major. So from a Queensland Police Service and a whole of government service, this is how Queensland is actually moving towards in the future, being proactive, trying to identify issues early, and through a whole range of community supports and programs that we've got available to us to identify these individuals earlier and hopefully redirect them along their road to trajectory in ideology and extremism. So From a QPS perspective, so that's Queensland Police Service, I'll just call it QPS, make it a little bit shorter. We have a range of things that we're doing to try and address these and trying to reduce and make our community safer. We've got obviously our intelligence services and all of our intelligence groups that look at getting the information early, assessing it, identifying vulnerable people within our communities so that we can try and put packages and actions in place to reduce their vulnerabilities. So that's one side of things that we do, and that's very proactive in what we're trying to achieve there. Another one that we've got is our community contact liaison officers. So these contact CCLOs are members of our community, they're police officers that come from a minority background and then integrate within the community and within the groups within the community that are minorities, and try and build those and establish those relationships early on so that we've got a point of contact and a point of conversation that we can have between these people and our minority groups. So that's really particularly important. And in Toowoomba, we've got a fellow who is from...
Kurdish. Kurdish, right?
Yeah.
Are you referring to Zana?
Yeah.
Kurdish.
Yeah, so he's Kurdish, and then we've also got a new one who has come from, he's from London, so he's just about to start. And so they've got really strong community connections. They've both been in Toowoomba for a very long time, so they've built that trust within the community. So members of the community are much more willing to speak with them about issues of concern so that we can get involved and do something to reduce that. So that's one thing, and that's a really big thing that we've got going on. My role as a Security Counter-Terrorism Network Coordinator, I wear a lot of different hats, but one of those is our Countering Violent Extremism program. So with that, and under the Australian Government and the Counter-Terrorism Plan, all states in Australia have got CVE programs, and how we run them depends on how and what the needs of our state is. For us in Queensland, we've identified that working with NGOs and with government departments to identify vulnerable people, identify what their vulnerabilities and their issues are, and then offering them programs so that they are less likely to continue across that path that we're concerned about. So one particular case may be the fact that this particular youth was having difficulties in integrating into the society. He started making some really concerning statements that we were particularly concerned about. So we identified that he was having learning difficulties at school, and the school wasn't able to deliver what he needed. So we got him, as part of a government program, additional education and support within the classroom, which really assisted him, and he was able to then be able to express himself more freely and express himself in a correct manner. And then all of those concerns that we had seemed to dissipate. So it's identifying the individuals early and then identifying what they need as a CVE so that we can counteract that potential for extremism and that violence that we might see. So that's a really big program that we've got. And what we probably identified quite early on is that our police officers had a really low knowledge and an understanding of what we were trying to find out and what they should be looking for in these individuals. So what we did is we had a massive education program where every police officer in the state, which is 15,000, was educated in what we call our IRAD. So they're indicators of radicalisation. It's a little tool that we use that looks at the individual, their social context, their ideologies, the potential for ideologies, and their criminality. And it gives the police officers a little checklist to run through that identifies any concerns. Then this checklist is basically forwarded to an investigator who can then engage with the individual and put some really good strategies in place that may reduce their concerns and their vulnerabilities. So that's a big one, and that's our CVE program. And we have a whole group of people that work with these individuals on a full-time basis and engage with them and go and sit down and work out what supports that they need so that we can reduce the likelihood of them moving on to conducting something of a grievance-fueled violence or something that would cause a CT event. So that's one side of what I do. I also do a lot of engagement, obviously, with our priority site holders and our key business organisations within our communities to increase that understanding. As we all know, it's much easier to build relationships in the time of peace than if we're trying to go and build a relationship and try and build rapport with somebody when we need something out of them. So it's been honest up front, developing that trust and respect that Mr. Hanif mentioned earlier, and really being able to open up a dialogue that we can all relate to so that we're more willing to share and work towards common goals. And that's the really big thing about education and getting out into the community to ensure that we're all moving in the same way. So I think the big thing, our big issues for us and what we see coming up in the future is obviously our foreign fighters that are still over in these countries, and then our returnees, which I think probably all of us are concerned about, from how are they going to come back into the community, and what are our concerns, and how are we going to manage them, and do we have the resources to support them correctly? So all of those sorts of things are things that we have to be thinking about and what we're trying to work towards within the policing perspective. Pure Land's a perfect example of how really good social cohesion can work within a community, so they can identify and they can assist and they can reach out to policing services when they need to, like I can reach in if I've got a troubled individual who may need some further assistance. So it's a really good relationship and a really good community venture, I suppose, that can really educate and provide that advice and guidance that we need. We spoke earlier about CT and terrorism articles that appear in the news in Australia, and I think it was one every 2 days in one of the major 5 newspapers. So we recently did a survey within the Queensland Police and asking residents of Queensland what their major concerns were when it came to crime and violence and things like that. Their first concern was child exploitation and offences against children. The second one was road safety, and the third one was counter-terrorism and associated things. We haven't had a counter-terrorism or a terrorism event in Queensland, but that just shows how important and how much the media can impact on the way people think. So another thing that we have to work on is how we message to the media and get the media messaging in the correct way so that we don't create angst within our communities, but we get the right message across at all times. And this all becomes part of the whole CVE and countering violent extremism within the community. It's not just working on one particular thing, it's a holistic approach. So that's where the Queensland Police is headed with that. I'm happy to take any questions, but that's probably all I need to offer. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. That's very informative. We'll get the questions after everyone's done. The next presenter is Edin Khoo. He is a poet, writer, and translator. He is well known for his contributions towards cultural preservation. Edin Khoo has worked with scores of Malaysia's leading traditional artists, including shadow puppeteers, musicians, dramatists, and dancers. He has focused principally on the state of Kelantan, researching aspects of oral transmission, cultural and religious politics, and aspects of ritual in traditional theatre. Edin?
Is it? Okay. I'm going to try and stick to my 10 minutes. So I'm just going to try and encapsulate as briefly as possible what I think the problem is, and whether I think religious values have any effect on ameliorating or moderating what I believe are increasingly extreme tendencies in many parts of our society. One of the things not mentioned in my bio is that I started out as a working journalist, continue to be a working journalist, and we are on the front line of horrible news, which gets more and more horrible every single day, especially if you analyze and you begin to see the facts as not telling you enough. One of the things about journalism today is you find that statistics say so much, but they tell you very little. And that you're essentially dealing with cases of extremism, which taken to its very extreme then becomes an act of terrorism, is the fact that so many of these issues are actually quite sublimated and are existential in nature. And it'll be very unwieldy, I suppose, for purposes of a conference of this kind that attempts to come up with some kind of formulation at the end to say that so much of it is about how our lives are organized and how our lives are lived. The pressures, the alienation, the categorization, what constitutes mainstream is sometimes just too much to bear. That added with all kinds of other psychological and metaphysical aspects makes this issue of extremism and terrorism a very, very elusive and opaque one. You know, at the turn of the century, a wonderful Russian novelist wrote a really provocative book. And he started out with the lines, and the book was focused on a postman who works in a post office, does the same thing every single day, and somewhere along the way he has a breakdown. And he writes, the first lines of the book are, I am an angry man, I am a frustrated man, I am an ugly man, and there's something wrong with my liver. Yeah, that novelist was Dostoevsky. And I think he painted the first picture, essentially, of what would become the alienated figure in all of our contemporary lives. When we talk about religious values, and I remember the discourse that was started on terrorism all those decades ago, and the conversation was focused on finding the root causes of terrorism. And somewhere along the way, we seem to have exhausted our will and our imagination in actually exploring what those root causes are, simply because sometimes they don't provide prescriptions and they don't provide very simple answers to resolving many of these issues. We have been talking about respect and mutual trust, and we have to continue to keep talking about them. There's no way we can't. I am quite suspicious of the word values. I hear a little too much of that all the time in our society. And values often leads to, you know, a kind of morality, a kind of puritanism, and a kind of sanctimoniousness that creates all the problems of divisiveness in the first place. So I'm really quite circumspect about it. And if we are to get a hand on, you know, the issue of the root causes of terrorism, we have to really go deep and rigorously into looking at why society is getting increasingly alienated. And why people hold on to, as far as religious values are concerned, as far as the destiny of man and faith is concerned in almost all religions, there is nothing positive or inspiring at the end of it all. Yeah. There's the age of the hypocrite, the munafiq, and we live through, as Hindus believe, the Kali Yuga. Yeah? We confront the apocalypse in Christianity. You know, the world is a battlefield in the Bhagavad Gita. So, as far as our ultimate and final fate, you know, it's not a positive one. When we talk about religious values also, we must focus a great deal on how religion is read. And one of the major problems, of course, today is the organization of religions itself into whole power structures upon which you know, all kinds of power struggles are continuing to go on. So is there actually room for individual faith? Is there actually room for you know, individual empathy of a particular faith, or is everything really kind of structured in ways that are constantly competitive and contending? And if that is the way, then there is bound to continually be people who take its messages to its extremes. I was very interested in what Ahmad was saying about what is the point that a religious text becomes an act of terrorism. Yeah. That is a very interesting thing, and that is rooted in the reading, and that is rooted very much in the nurturing of a particular community of believers of any kind. I'm quite close to terrorism, I suppose, in the sense that my family, my extended family, not my immediate family, but my extended family, were major fundraisers for the liberation Tigers of Tamil. Yeah? They were fundraisers. I'm from a Ceylon Tamil background on my mum's side. And I have had opportunities to encounter many individuals, some of them relatives of mine. And I noticed what ideology can actually do to kind of strengthen or make of iron what is a more curved nature. Yeah. And you see that increasingly being spread in so many different quarters. The work I do in the northeast of Malaysia, in Kelantan, really goes into interrogating what are the cultural things that constitute a community, their worldview, their way of life, their belief systems. What happens when people are severed and pulled out from that and pushed into a highly ideologized society where complexity of everything, of social makeup, of belief systems, of the individual self is made less accessible. What happens when there's a revisionism of history? What happens when even your faith and the way the faith has been practiced for centuries is revised? What kind of societies then do you produce? You produce increasingly tense ones. The communities I work with, for example, maybe a little bit of background about Kelantan might be useful in why I work with these communities. I work with ritual people, people who are steeped in therapeutic healing. They do dance forms and shadow puppetry and things like that are related to therapeutic healing, community well-being, and so on. And they're hundreds of years old, but were proscribed in 1991 by the Islamic Party-led state government. And my interest really is not about fighting state governments or fighting, but really to try and analyze how communities see themselves, what they see as legitimate about their communities, and what they see as no longer legitimate about their communities, and why that happens. That is especially a source of concern for me, for a region like Southeast Asia, where its very essence and it's innately plural. That the culture has been shaped by waves of influences, and that the more recent trend we see of a certain kind of Puritan reading of communities is a very contemporary phenomenon. What makes it all the extremely worrying sometimes, and we see this trend now in just about every faith, that is becoming an ideology, from the BJP to a host of other things, is the power of the state. The power of the state essentially to make all the necessary arrangements and create all the necessary armatures to legitimize certain things in a culture and delegitimize other things in a culture. And of course, what that creates within the psychology of entire communities, especially young people. What is very interesting about a small state like Kelantan, I think it's very informative, that this state, which has a largely homogeneous society, how that homogeneity, if interrogated as a result of so much historical interaction, is actually very heterogeneous and very complex, and so is able to sustain and maintain a highly pluralized way of looking at the world. This becomes less and less possible and less and less easy when ideology, whether it's history as ideology, whether it's culture as ideology, whether it's identity as ideology, whether it's religion as ideology, is driven into the modern system. So that what you find in a place like Kelantan is that people who are 50 and above have a lot more openness and a lot greater adaptability and versatility, dealing with complex issues, sometimes even of between communities. And we have less possibilities among young people who are 30 and below, who go through the modern system and who really pick up a lot of their very black and white view of the world from the modern system, because it is systematized. So in that sense, to look at extremism and then terrorism in its continuum, and to see all the various forces of work at work, sometimes I want to ask very fundamental questions about what systems are actually creating, what are they perpetuating, what are they creating in the long run, how are we reading things that we are supposed to read, what kind of liberty exists on just about every forum that we have to talk about things like interfaith understanding. I find it very paradoxical because there are as many restrictions that are being imposed even as we talk about opening up. A lot of religious dialogue, for example, today is focused on a demonization of liberal thinking, of secularization, of secularism. Those two trends of thought that really have been able to contain religious differences within a particular system. These things are not properly explained. When we talk about comparative religion, we are not having the Akbarian view, essentially, of religious representatives sitting down and having very deep, rigorous philosophical discussions about the nature of faith and the nature of God and so on. We are talking about niceties, and that we are circumscribing even as we talk about the need to empathize, and we need to understand. Actually, we don't even talk about empathize or understand. We talk a lot about tolerate. And what is toleration? But I'll put up with you until I can't or won't. Right? So really, are we being very gestural in many of the things we do? Because we do know that the world isn't a very nice place. And again, if you're a journalist and you're on the front line, every day it's very ugly news. And it's very ugly news, completely contradictory to things we are talking about today. There is no respect. There is very, very little respect. And there is, even when there is respect, the language of respect sometimes is couched in very gestural terms. So I'm wondering, in a forum like this, how deep are people really willing to go? And how serious are we in asking very rigorous, sometimes very painful questions about where all of this is leading to?
Thank you. Idin has left us with so many questions, so hopefully some of you might be able to contribute to that discussion later. But just before I open up to the floor for the question and answer, we have Reverend Sarnangara from he's actually the chief of the Sentul Buddhist Temple. He missed out the session at 12:30, so if we could maybe give him a couple of minutes to just say a couple of words. Thank you.
Chair, it's a great honor, and also I have to apologize for the delay, and also to make the program squeeze into this program. In fact, I thought this already covered up for the morning section. And anyway, it's a wonderful presentation I just heard, especially from the Australia onward into the Kelantan class. It's beautifully, wonderfully, we feel it, the great compassionate and tolerant understanding in the religious, the value, which is you implement such a societies. Even Dr. asked me to say something about Sri Lanka. Believe me, last 37 years I'm here. From 1980 beginning 80, 81, 82 onward. We were in Impact Sami and we are Abing group very, very close. We had the friendship group Malaysia. If you want common activities, we can mention more. What I had to do it, I had more experience in this society than in Sri Lanka. Last couple of years ago, we had the wonderful programs, which is charity program. We call it the EduCare program, which is providing for the 7 to 10,000 children practically every Malaysia. Our patron was at that time Tan Sri Salya. Later part now is the Lincoln University, Mother Tatu became a patron. Throughout the year, Brother Ivan, Klantan, all those flood victim time with the financial group and other educare program, number of occasions. I totally agree. A lot of, not only even here as well as for the Klantan. Klantan is so friendly, so close. There's a beautiful things. When I, many occasion when I was in the Nikasis, many occasions we were together. And in one of the beautiful, wonderful function he was attending in the Kelantan, the Thai temple, when the Chakun passed away, the whole group was there, that moment for the last funeral rites. The important, wonderful, beautiful, wonderful things, the Malaysian spirit is able to contribute many ways. Of course, I'm in Australia, I know, and the recent incident in the Christchurch, we were in the New Zealand embassy with our big group, wonderful people around there, with humble request to being, we are together in the Malaysian, the Buddhist, Islam, Christian, Hindu, Sikh, as well as for the Tao religion organization, get involved for the beautiful, humble requests for the authority, the government to appeal. And important, wonderful things, last couple of years, when an incident happened in Sri Lanka, some of the organization requests whether we are able to contribute something, our educare program over there. When I talk to the organization, they agree. Even last 7, 8 years, the small way we able to help, because individually, because our program conducted by the Liaison not allowed foreign to go out money from for other countries. When the individually sponsors come forward, then they purchase certain school item in the Trincomalee as well as for Jaffna area. We, being the Islam, Muslim school, Hindu school, in fact I just forward the photo to the doctor, and because I didn't prepare anything, all those activities, but anyway, the important, wonderful things, I strongly believe it. Edwin mentioned, just now he mentioned, the religious tolerance. I strongly believe it rather than tolerance. I strongly believe it if you're able to understand, able to go deeper, philosophical understanding each and every religious organization, there's, I think, great, wonderful things. Without realizing, without understanding, so many occasions, Islam University, very open visiting us. They had one program, not Islam University in Gombak, Islam University in PJ. Those days, 1980 something onward, very regular visit in our place. They had the comparative religion. Some of the professors are coming, some of the students are coming. Even they can contribute in the Pali verses. You may surprise the Islam youth able to understand, given the Pali verses with meaning, which is most of the Buddhists today not able to contribute, the Malaysian Buddhists. Such a deep understanding, I really admire. They're able to go such a, get so much interest to realize, to understand the other I think the Malaysian religious organization, especially for the Islam faith as well as for the Buddhist faith, Christian faith as well as Hindu faith, we were together interreligious harmony, many things. I strongly believe it that program, even recently a big group, and we had a meeting recently with the Dato Jega and the Cyber organization, how we are going to reach this even impact 1 year to 2 years ago, how we are going to reach out this particular program into the Sri Lanka and other part of the places. If I still with discussion, the move, we haven't come to the the decision to how we are going to contribute in that particular country. Message is very clear, message very direct. How the religious leaders, especially for the religious leaders, in hand working in the ground, that's the important thing. Not within the conference room, not within the 5-star hotel in the organizing. If you're able to contribute something to the needy by charity or by the way, I think that's a great, beautiful message. People able to understand, people able to realize through by example. I think that is going to be more meaningful. And we highly appreciated it, and we celebrate for the wonderful audience, so patient, each and everyone being here, so alert as the great understanding, and if we able to package something, the Malaysian able to contribute many more things as well. The Malaysia is quite a unique place, but one more thing has been the media represented over here. Sometimes the media like to coverage more negative than positive things. I mean, there's nothing wrong because the demand is there. If you are contribute, even with this conference, if you talk about for the contributing unity, harmony, very little sometimes coverage, especially social media. Is anything negative, is going to be popular demand and providing. That's now it's a biggest problem. Everybody try to be journalist, everybody try to be the media spokesperson. Someone doesn't know anything, simple handphone, if you have the WhatsApp and the Facebook and all those things, they become the media person, the spokesman person. There's a huge damage happening. Actually, when I see in the Sri Lanka, there's a biggest damage happening because individually they are giving wrong information as well as for that make people unhappy, that make people for the peaceful environment destroyed by that 1 or 2 little knowledge people, not the educated one, little knowledge people. There's a huge damage going to take place. Negative, the news always posting, the small things may highlight the huge thing and posting here and there. This is the thing. We are lucky, but in this country, for the manage every single thing in the perfect manner, not able to, number of incidents happen, they manage very well in the, what called the forces, the security, they're able to manage very well. I think Malaysia able to contribute many ways that harmony, tolerance, understanding, that's all those wonderful values we able to, I think, contribute. I think that the beautiful message we able to send to Sri Lanka as well. This is the wonderful presenters, each and every one of you. I believe it, morning section is more live, is more the many speakers. Just within few minutes, I was there. I really admire each and every contribute what you've done. Very positive. The thought into this conference, highly appreciated. Thank you very much. I give you a little opportunity. Thank you, highly appreciated.
Thank you. Just would like to share what Edin shared, how deep are we, going with, are we just going to talk about, what's beautiful, harmony, coexistence, or are we going to really look into the systemic issues of what causes racism? Is there an institutional racism, right? Which is the larger question to ask. So without further ado, I'd like to open it to the floor if there are any questions. Yes, Prof.
Yeah, this is a very interesting set of presentations because it balanced it balanced, perhaps it didn't balance, but it pointed out a contrast here between the idea of looking at things in a very deep philosophical perspective and then looking at things kind of from the standpoint of the village. And so what the question that I would sort of like to, I don't have an answer to it at all, but it'd be interesting to hear people say how we go about balancing this philosophical orientation and a more practical orientation when we're talking about questions of interreligious relationships.
Yeah, I think the experience that we heard from Mr. Hanif just now, right? I think it's a very good example how we can translate the religious value to deal with the local problems. To organize or to translate abstract ideas of values in the large scale like that, it is quite difficult. In my work in rehabilitation, we contextualize. We understand the problem first, and then we try to use it in the exact and accurate context and individual as well. Only then we can do it. We can manage it very well. I think that's the context that we should look at. It can be done, I mean, at the individual level, it can be done at the family level. For example, how can we translate the values of mutual respectability in the family context, for example? I think that's a good starting point to begin with. How can we instill in the children respecting others at home? And then we can radiate that value in the context of school, for example, or the universities, and then the larger communities, university level, societies, and the state or the country. What we've seen in the Wotombo, is it? Tumumba. Okay, Tumumba, I think is a very good example how we can do that. And I've seen, a lot of programs in Europe, for example. And some of the countries, they have a specific local groups, local programs to deal with extremism. In Netherlands, the city hall is doing this on a large scale. So they put together people from different agencies and the civil societies together, including the media, local authorities. I think it's a very good thing. I think we don't do it here. I think in the context of Malaysia, if we have the case of radicalization, things is going on in society, that is the police would monitor the individual. They can't do anything. It is illegal if they take action at that point. It is not their job actually to intervene. The intervention should be done by other people. I used to ask, like, if you look at people is involving radicalization, what should you do? Can you go and tell them, hey, look, you are about to violate laws. Would you stop it? He said that, no, it is not my job. It's somebody's, civil society's job. But in the context of Netherlands or the country, they would convene like police, civil society, NGO, Ministry of Youth, representative from multiple agencies to sit together to decide what is the best course of action. Only then they can decide. I think that we can do it. That kind of model, we can stop the progressing radicalization. So my point here is we need to look at the context before we decide what to do. That's all.
Yes, please.
My answer to that is I'm not too sure whether that this is the right answer. Probably mentioned about how deep we go into some discussions and all that. We do that, but more at the manageable level because we don't want to take it outside. So there are two groups that discuss such questions. First is within the Tumba Interfaith Working Groups, because this group meets once a month. So issues, very, very hard issues like is affecting the religion, the values. So we discuss within ourselves. Example, issues like LGBT, same-sex marriage, etc. Because each has got its different interpretation. And we have another committee group that is called the community matters group that is checked by the police. So we also meet every quarterly, and we get all the different community cultural groups to sit down and discuss some very deep, hard issues, about issues like that, radicalization, why is it your people are behaving like that, what are your issues, you're coming here. So we do have that, but again, as I qualify, it's we don't want to bring it out too much. It's more at the manageable level, where we can manage it, because it's big, it's good, we feel it's good to discuss within the leaders first and see whether they could be somebody who could later shape the opinion of the others, or they could be the people that go back and relate with their community better.
Okay. Any other questions?
Here.
Yeah. Yes, please.
Probably not a question, just a comment. The war against religious extremism, I think, sounds like a very big mountain. And a journey of 1,000 miles must start with one step. And I think each one of us belongs to a faith of some sort. If I'm not very wrong, a good majority of us belong to what is called the Abrahamic faith, Christianity and Islam. Well, I've not seen the Jews here. But one challenge I usually pose to some of the students that come to see me, and they come from the Islamic faith or Christian or Judaism, and they're, angry about, so-and-so, I wish we could do something about it. I sit with them and ask, what God is it that we believe in? You as a member of the Abrahamic faith. And we believe in a compassionate God. We believe in a very, very strong God who made the whole earth. And then I ask, don't you think such a God can defend himself? Do you really need to defend him? If he's worth being worshipped, then for sure we can rely on him to defend himself. And we engage at that level without having to raise lots of big questions. And before we know it, we have Jewish students, we have Muslims, we have Christians gather together, and we just have an intellectual chat about our faith. And we find that we actually belong to an Abrahamic faith. We believe in a God who is powerful. I just wanted to make that comment.
Okay, thank you. Yes, Elias.
Hiya, thank you very much again for the presentation, it's very interesting. I just like to respond to the comment made by yourself at the end. I like this idea of how deep can we go, because I think it's often we don't, because for me going deep means sacrifices. To what extent are we willing to sacrifice our, parts of ourselves, part of our happiness, part of our identity, to somehow accept the other? And I agree with this, and I think the word tolerance is really problematic, because it's like, well, I accept you until you do something wrong. And I think what we should be focusing on is acceptance. To what extent can we, are we willing to accept each other? And then the question is, what is the criteria of acceptance, which is perhaps, I don't have the answer for, but maybe there is an answer out there, and I don't know whether anybody has found the answer, given the fact that a lot of the CVE and PV programs are struggling to be successful. So that's my sort of comment. But my question is basically looking at the whole CVE PV programs, and maybe because we've had people from Australia, maybe contact Australia, talking about the issue of CVE PV. As I understand it, Australia, yes, it has a number of people that have gone abroad to fight for ISIS, and it has an issue of radicalization. But is that issue of radicalization among Muslims, is that a bigger issue than, should we say, the radicalization of white Australians? And then another issue, talking about the whole idea of radicalization itself, and how agencies within Australia and Europe, for example, use the sort of radicalization models. If we accept that in the UK we had a report about 15, 20 years ago about institutional racism, but our police itself was found to be institutionally racist. Recommendations were made, but the police in itself only took up a certain amount of recommendations. Going by that, isn't the whole radicalization idea in itself based on a racializing racism that exists within the institution and the theory of radicalization, because it's asking people to react on gut reactions, and those gut reactions are based on a very racialized system. So, for example, if we're talking about Muslims in the UK, for example, even Australia, if society is socialized to see Muslims as a problem, then isn't the academic, the police officer, the health worker gonna act on their gut reaction rather than have an objective understanding what the problem is? So basically my question is, do you not think the whole radicalization problem is an issue because it's racialized in itself, and it's a racist model because it asks people to react on basic racist reactions because they've been socialized in society?
Prof, can I let Ahmad add first?
I would support the idea suggested by Dr. Ilyas just now. There are 2 points I would like to mention. Number one, I think the way we view human beings is problematic because most people start viewing human being as a religious creature first and then human being the second. What we should do is just to look at a person as a human being first, as a members of humanity, and religion comes second. I think if we can start on that basis, I think we can deal with other human beings, other races more easily. So, because what I have seen is that when we start classifying others as religion, this is Christian, this is Muslim, this is Jews, and so on and so forth, our views, our understanding, our concept, the way we behave, the way we interact would be problematic. That's the first point. I think that we should change our paradigm to look at human being as human being, as a part of the humanity, rather than view them as a religious creature. Second thing is our understanding about religion itself is problematic. If you mention, for example, the word Jews in Malaysia, Israel in Malaysia, for example, you can't put anything related to Israel in this country. That would be politicized and that would become a very controversial issue. Whereas in the Quran is mentioned about the Bani Israel, and there are a lot of other things related to Jews. I mean, our understanding about the Jews and Christian, about Judaism, Bani Israel, is completely off tangent, is wrong. It has been politicized, and it has been misunderstood. So I think that, yeah, as you have said, when this idea get into the system, it becomes institutionalized, and we will run organization, we will run the institution, for example, in order to de-radicalize things. How can we do this? Because our understanding about the human being or the subject itself has been contaminated. So I think that is my point, the 2 points I would like to mention. Thank you.
Prof.
I know the kind of models that you're talking about, and there are all sorts of reasons why they don't even work. You know, the various, I don't know, they're called stair-step models, they're called conveyor belt models, all of those things. And they're not scientifically formulated. They were formulated by a bunch of people in the New York City Police Department, and they didn't know very much about social sciences or psychology or anything else. So I think we have to get rid of those to begin with. The one point about some of this stuff, like the white Australian guys turning into terrorists, kids in El Paso, Texas, you know, white kids turning into terrorists, is that if there's nothing good about it, but the media coverage of this will hopefully drive home the message that looking at this kind of stuff in a racialized way, or in a way that's specific to one religious tradition or another, just can't be carried on, because it doesn't get to the problem. It doesn't get to the general phenomena that transcends ethnic, religious. I don't even like to use the word race because it has no meaning. But ethnic and religious differences, that's not the issue. And hopefully the kind of media attention that New Zealand and Texas and a few others have brought up will make people start thinking about it in a different way.
Yeah, I was drawn to Ahmad's kind of deconstruction of the various things, and the comment about looking at people as human beings first. That's a completely unenviable task. It's the way to go, but it's unenviable, because at every single stage, at every single compartment, you are bundled with identities constantly. And we talked earlier about, for example, looking, getting an understanding of the people of the book and so on. But you mentioned the word, it's all politicized, and yet we seem to constantly run away from the politics. We are not addressing the politics, we are not addressing the structures that help perpetuate. I find it a great irony, you see, because so many of these political implosions within are what causes extremism, and then of course the most extreme of that extremism, which is terrorism, then try and heal it. Yeah, we are creating the implosions that we then try and heal, and we don't seem to be able or well equipped enough to grapple with this major monster in our face, which we all try to evade. It's a power question.
Since Edin is working on the Kelantan traditional art, like Mak Yong and Wayang Kulit, right? There is this recent documentary that I watched in Singapore television where they interview a Mak Yong artist in Terengganu. And because PAS has actually won in Terengganu, now Mak Yong has been removed from one of the traditional performing arts. So she even met up with the Mufti to explain to him that I've already taken out the elements which is non-religious, and still, she's having a lot of difficulty. And, it's like trying to make sense of, the cultural identity, and there's so much of like sadness and the sense of loss and helplessness. And I can identify with some of those issues. And, looking at, for example, Indonesia, right? Prof is an anthropologist. We see how the saints spread Islam in a peaceful manner, and how they do it is actually by using like wayang kulit, right? Like Sunan Kalijogo and all that stuff. So you see, it's like, the interesting, yeah.
Now, raises a very interesting question, because you look at Mak Yong, you look at wayang kulit, and we've come to be conditioned to believe these are, song and dance things. They're not. They encapsulate the entire belief system of a people. And it's very tragic when the Mak Yong actress, who happens to be the troupe I work with actually, needs to get affirmation from the Mufti about something that has been practiced within her community and within her tradition and within her culture for hundreds of years, all the while being Muslim, that she needs to get his acknowledgement. I mean, that is, no, that's not something positive. So it's just trying to work out a problem. But, one of the most important things, I think, when you talk about the philosophical, Prof, is the fact that language has become so reductive. Language has become so reductive. Our ability to have a dialogue has become incredibly reduced. The potential to have very long, elaborate discussions about, say, the subconscious or the nature of personalities in Mak Yong, it's going to take a very long time, but it's very easy for somebody coming there with the authority of office to say this is, devil worship, or this is worship of supernatural beings and ghosts, and hantu jin jembalang punya cerita lah, you know. Very easy for somebody to just say that, and then you have the authority of the office to put a stamp on it. Meanwhile, you alienate and you dislocate an entire generation of people from what you term local knowledge, from kinship networks, and the whole source of power then is placed in an office. This is the kind of systematization of radicalism I'm talking about. It's actually everywhere. And our ability to question and to deconstruct these power relations is extremely, extremely limited.
Sorry, Imtiaz?
One question which we have not discussed is, how much is the role of nationalism in religious extremism? When a particular group engages in extremist activities, how much do they do it for their own country and religion? Or race and religion, as what Elias was talking about. For example, in Myanmar, they are protecting race and religion, not religion and race. And I think this applies to all the extremist groups in wherever they are. They're doing it for their country. Ahmad would like to hear Ahmad on this too, that they're doing it for the country and for their people, and how much of that has a universal element at the same time.
No, I think this is an important point. In the previous session, we sort of touched upon it, about looking at how, for example, so one of the ideas about radicalization is the fact that a response to your threat to your dignity or your group, and we can see it especially now, either it's religious literalism, so re-anchoring yourself in something which is certain because the attack upon your group has made life uncertain for you, so you re-anchor yourself. And same thing for if we're talking ethno-nationalism. So again, attacking your group entrenches you in your some kind of imagined, essentialized nationalism. And of course, extreme nationalism, again, is kind of creates an in-group and out-group based on xenophobia. And again, when you feel your group has been attacked by an other, often a threatening other, which is going to do some imaginary damage or destroy you, and then it's to re-anchor yourself in something which is basic and fundamental that everybody can share. But whether that traction then, whether that conflict then gets global traction, it's a different thing. So we know with Kashmir, for example, in the UK, lots of people are protesting about Kashmir, but it's only Pakistanis of Kashmiri heritage. You don't see the Arabs, the Turks, and so on protesting. And of course, with other groups, Myanmar, the same kind of thing, Central African Republic, the same kind of thing. It's just that there isn't attraction for the narrative of these conflicts to reach that global level, that they don't have the narrative doesn't reach globally. So, and it just stays locally or in connecting with that ethnic group. So Kashmir is more an ethnic thing rather than it being a religious thing, although there are, within the UK context and within sort of Kashmir, they are trying to make it a religious thing, referring to this global imaginary ummah. The problem with that global imaginary ummah, it only seems to be a concept that's relevant to the diaspora Muslims, rather than being something that is relevant to Muslims in the Muslim majority countries, because of course here, the idea of ethnicity and nationalism is perhaps more stronger than the idea of a transnational imagined community. So for me, local conflict can only go if they have global traction. If they don't have global traction, either through religious symbolism or some kind of a global concern about human rights abuses like the Palestinian issue, then they're always going to stay local.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the question. Yeah, the ethno-nationalism and radicalization is an old issue, but it's getting a popular trend nowadays. Before this, perhaps after 9/11, we heard there's only Al-Qaeda group and Jamaat Islami and all these terrorist organizations related to Muslims. But these days, we also heard that people from, let's say, a person like Brenton Tarrant in New Zealand, who is doing it not for the sake of religion, basically, but for the sake of race. So, and they receive a kind of, we also can see the same kind of movement in the States and in Europe. It's getting trend now. in response to migrations of Muslim to Europe. So it's a kind of parallel phenomenon right now. We have in one hand the ISIS or Daesh is creating trouble in the Middle East, and many people actually going out from Middle East, running away from ISIS. They went to Europe and they found white supremacist group or ethno-nationalist group in there as well. They feel threatened because a lot of people coming there and feeling that they're being invaded, basically. Not only there in Europe, but also as far as in New Zealand and elsewhere. I think this trend is going to, we're going to see this trend pick up all over the world. Yeah, that's all.
Okay, Debbie, no questions for you. Okay, so just, like moving forward, perhaps, we'd like to, I think every panel gave recommendations. So for me, I think the way forward is really dialogue, and I think Captain Hanif also does that in Toowoomba. My company, Alertis, does peace building dialogues in Turkey, Nigeria, the United Kingdom and Southeast Asia. And to be honest, one thing that really stood out for me was when I was in Nigeria, where all over the media, what's portrayed is really the Muslim-Christian conflict. But when we were there with Prof. Woodward, what we realized is that the issues are actually quite transnational, and it's very similar issues, but just in different contexts and different environment. So the issues pretty much, they're talking about corruption, income inequality, issues of poverty, issues of immigration, of other African coming to Nigeria to take over, the land or their jobs. So sometimes, it's very easy to just say, oh, it's because of religion, but, if we do not unpack and look at, what is the root cause, then we can never actually solve the issues, right? It's actually symptomatic of a very deep issue. So with that, I'd like to close with this one, verse from the Quran, which says that God created you of different tribes and different gender, and the best amongst you are the righteous, right? So God didn't say the best amongst you are the Jews or the Muslims or the Christians. So just be kind to one another, and hopefully you guys have benefited tremendously like I did from this session. Thank you so much.
Okay, Assalamualaikum. Good afternoon. As we come to the final session, which is the resolution session. It's a drafting of the resolution, rather. Yeah, I don't think we need to rush it. Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Minister has said that he is very much looking forward to receive the resolution document. But I think we will take our time, to develop the resolution items. We have a draft today that will be read out by Sister Sukaina. Yeah, but before that, just let me say a few words. When we decided to organize this international seminar, one of the concerns in the country is about the lack of national action plan for preventing and countering violent extremism. Malaysia is a country which does not have one. But having said that, not many countries have it anyway. It said that Philippines and Indonesia are supposed to finalize theirs. And we feel that we need to do it, I think mainly because of the issue of consolidation of the activities that we are already doing. We did a survey of different activities, research and whatnot, done by different ministries as well as agencies. And we found out that there were a lot of duplication, a lot of overlap. So we felt that having an NAP would enable for there to be a secretariat and a platform on which we can exchange ideas, look at best practices, and see what we can do to implement them practically across the country. Yeah. So the idea was originally about consolidating activities, research, etc. At the same time, we also see PCVE as a public health model, in the sense that PVE, or prevention of violent extremism, should be seen as part of regular nation building or sustainability of nation building. And we feel that this is something that should not actually be labeled as PCVE. There's no sense in having nation building programs labeled as PCVE. And CVE would, of course, be focused more on targeted segmentation, those populations or communities who are at risk. And having said that, after hearing all of this, I think, I have to be honest, what resonated with me is what Brother Edin said. Yeah? I think fundamentally, if I'm to be really honest, when we talk about our identity politics in the future, Malaysia will have a bit of a challenge going forward in the next, I think, 2-3 decades, because of global identity politics that's happening and the axis of civilizations that's rising as global powers in the future. So we are caught in between different layers of identity, primordial identity that we have, the national identity that we have as well. At the same time, there is also a fear of over-regulation. Yeah, we have state oppression as well. And in this sense, I'm concerned about how countries like China are managing their issues with regards to PCVE. And of course, they had a delegation coming over to Malaysia to visit a number of places, including IAUM, ISAC. One of the concerns that I have is that in the evaluation panel of Muslim so-called radicals in the country, there are no Muslim experts. Yeah? Of course, what do you expect? It's an atheist country, it's a communist country. But how do you convince then a country like China that religious values can help in PCVE? I'm going to China on the 2nd of September, coming back on the 7th. So hopefully we'll have a good discussion while I'm there. Okay, having said all of this, as I mentioned, the draft that we have developed today is very much a draft. We are opening it for your comments as well as your contributions. Inshallah, at the end of it all, it will be finalized and co-signed by the organizers to be delivered to Yang Berhormat Minister of Home Affairs. So I think now I would invite Sister Sukaina to present the draft of the resolution, please.
So the draft is not completed yet, but I would read to you what has been made so far. Is on the establishment of the National Action Plan, NAP, for Malaysia, recalling the decision of the United Nations Secretary General having released a plan of action to prevent violent extremism, PVE, in response to the 4th review of the Global Counter-Terrorism Strategy. Resolution 68-276. Security Council Resolution 2178, 2014. The plan recommends that each member state should consider develop a national plan of action, emphasis added, to prevent violent extremism, which sets national priorities for addressing the local drivers of violent extremism and complements national counter-terrorism strategies where they already exist. The UN further recommends the National Action Plan to be firmly grounded in human rights, developed a multidisciplinary manner, promote respect for the principle of equality before the law, address the issue of foreign terrorist fighters, and are aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, SDGs, and 2030 agenda. Furthermore, it's recalling the Security Council Resolution 2242 and 2250. We go next on the emphasis that different forms of extremism exist, ranging from the ideological, that is merely within the domain of thought, to violence when hateful ideology is acted upon. Recalls the conservatism is separated to extremism, but becomes extremism when the narrative within a certain conservative group becomes dominated by hate. Stress the ineffectiveness of post-9/11 policies and the need for a new framework to combat extremism in the modern day. 2, recommends the formation of the coordinating body for preventing and countering violent extremism, PCVE, under the purview of the Ministry of Home Affairs to consolidate government resources towards coordinate actionable response towards PCVE issues. 2.1, the overlapping responsibilities of different government agencies towards combating extremism, preventing the efficient enforcement of policies set by the government by having a coordinating body, government resources are maximized. 3, desires to engage in both those harboring extreme ideologies and those that are actually act upon their extreme ideologies. 3.1, the traditional approach of government being to only formulate reaction plans when the occurrence of extreme violence have come to pass, where a proactive approach to prevent such acts from even happening is more effective. 4, recommends to have PCVE youth program packages to develop the educational programs targeted to the youth and advance the cause of youth empowerment as beneficiaries and partners through academic and non-academic programs and activities in and out of institution of education. 4.1, education being closely related to molding of ideologies, denial of extremism, which prevents successful countermeasures could be removed. 5, desires to provide facilities for research on related topics of PCVE and accessibility by having free consensus data at villages, district level from Japatan, Pernakaan, Malaysia, to local institute laboratory research for extensive statistical analysis to stimulate a productive model of vulnerable youth. 6, recommends further dialogue to be held between members of different groups to refrain the evolving narratives attached with extremism, pay tributes to Axon, ANCOM, MEBIM, ABIM, and ICRAM for supporting the seminar and similar activities of IIUM in the past, and hopes of them to renew their support, and express sincere thanks and appreciation to gratitude to the Minister of Home Affairs of Malaysia, Yang Berhormat Tan Sri Dato' Haji Muhyiddin bin Haji Muhammad Yassin, for his efforts. The rest, whatever you have discussed within today's meeting, my friends over there, Ghufran and Umar, have worked and typed them down. And if you have any further suggestions or recommendations, please, you can email them to Dr. Danielle. Thank you very much.
Can I open this session for comments, for additions? Anything that you would like to include as part of the resolution? No comments? Tak ada? Oh, semua nak makan ni. Okay. All right. Reading between the lines, the silence is deafening. Okay, in this case. Okay. Okay, with that, before we end, I think there are some announcements to be made by the MC. Please, Anis.
Thank you very much, Dr. Daniel. Now I would like to invite Tuan Haji Jamal and Dr. Daniel to present the tokens of appreciation to our honourable guests and speakers.